PSC, kindly introduce your staff to the members before we proceed.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the PSC. As you know, I am the Commissioner General. To my right is Mr. Simbu, he's the Deputy Commissioner. To my left is Mr. Moore, he's another Deputy Commissioner. And to my farthest left is Mr. Biku, who is the Controller of Customs. And based on what we are doing in succession planning, I would hope that the PSC would allow my colleagues to be actively participants in this thing rather than Mr. Station himself answering all these questions. Thank you.
Well, from previous experience, I know your colleagues are quite capable of responding to any questions posed, especially Mr. Duku. So most definitely we will facilitate you redirecting any questions to your very competent staff. But members, we have 2017 and 2018 reports before us. And I put all of the paragraphs for Guyana Revenue Authority, which is 3 for 2017, 3, 4 for 2018. And I will also put Customs and Trades Administration, paragraphs 144 to 174 and 149 to 179 for 2018 for our consideration. The floor is open to all honorable members to put your questions to this agency.
Chairman, I'm at paragraph 149 of 2017. 163, 164 of 2018.
Where for 2018 you said?
163 and 164. I'd be happy if the Commissioner General could explain to us the whole process from seizure to closure of files, so that we could get an appreciation of what is preventing the closure of some of these files.
Well, first I would pass it on to Mr. Moore, but in the first instance, sir, the prevention of closure to files, if you would have checked those files, I mean, if there's a breakdown of those files, you would have recognized that the majority of those files were from Bobis. And after I would have dismissed the assistant commissioner who was in charge of Bobis for the same reason, that the files were not closed. That is one of the reasons why he was dismissed, other than scholarly, of course. So I'll ask Mr. Moore to explain the process for the PSC.
Thank you, CG. Permit me to briefly explain that for when a subject matter is seized, the Revenue Authority must, of course, allow the individual all process to lay claim in keeping with the provisions of Section 2 to 5. If after the individual lay claims to the subject matter, of course, if it is unaccustomed, then the Revenue Authority will commence the necessary proceedings. That is either by
Section 2 and 5, you said?
Section 2 to 5 of the Custom Act, Chapter 201.
Noted.
That section requires the individual to lay claim to the subject matter when seized within 1 month. If the claim is made within the prescribed time, then the Revenue Authority will commence proceedings if the item is unaccustomed, prohibited, or restricted. Once those proceedings are commenced, then it's in the court's jurisdiction, so we would have to await the outcome therein. If, however, no claim is made, then thereafter, the Revenue Authority can, or most of the time, they generally dispose of it in keeping with the law. That is, the Commissioner General can either dispose of it via sale, and if it's required to be disposed via sale, then notice will be given to the general public, which require us doing an advertisement informing the general public of the sale. But most of these files, what might have been as a result of the held up is some of them are pending destructions, some of them have engaged the court jurisdiction. So in those cases, we would have to, of course, dispose of the item first before we can actually close the file.
And what I would like to add, sir, is that if you look at the amount of files that are outstanding, it is about 25% of the files that are outstanding. And based on the process that it has to go through, that 25% that is outstanding would be over a 2 to 3 month period of time. So the fact that the files may be unclosed for that particular year, what we need to do is that instead of looking at files that were unclosed, we should probably look at the beginning stock and the ending stock and look over the year and see exactly what would have been done. And I think that is what we would have recommended to AG that he should actually look at. And a reconciliation could be easily provided for both 2017 and 2018, which would show that these files are actively being pursued to be closed after the relevant action has been taken.
A follow-up question, sir. So based upon the process, what will be a reasonable time frame for a file to be closed? All things being equal.
No, some files are closed within a month. Some files are closed within 3 months. Normally, based on the average, a file ought to be closed within a 4 month period of time.
So the failure of an officer or officers in not following through to close the files could result in significant loss of revenue because the items could be deteriorating while these files are being dealt with or not dealt with?
No, sir. The closure of a file means that everything has been completed, whether it has been either destructed or whether it has been sold or donated. So it is only after that process has been completed that
then the file will be closed.
Yes, sir.
So if I'm permitted as well, after what the Commissioner General is saying, that I must include that some of the files might have been left open as well because persons might express their interest to settle the matter in lieu of court proceedings. Section 271 of the Custom Act allows the Revenue Authority to accept compensation in lieu of court proceedings. So at all times, you give the taxpayer, if of course there's not a repeated offender, we allow them to pay the compensation to settle the matter. So at the time of the incident, they might have expressed their interest to settle the matter. But thereafter, sometimes 2-3 months down the line, they might commence payment and they might ask, of course, for a payment plan to pay the compensation. So before we can close those files, we would, of course, have to ensure that we recover the full compensation in those court proceedings. Now, that compensation sometimes might take a year, sometimes might take 6 months, sometimes 9 months, depending on the specific time that is given to the taxpayer to complete the payment of the compensation.
And that is a payment plan that is agreed on by the GRA.
That is agreed on. I must say as well, however, that at the time of the submission, that I'm not sure if it's reflected in the audit report, but an additional 1,222 files were closed from that number. So we have been working assiduously to close those files.
Member Maibol.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I heard that 1,222 files have been closed so far from this. An additional.
As I said, we managed to close 1,222. A balance of 299 million. Pardon me?
Current date, as in what you have closed right now to date.
It would be more. It would be more to date.
Because my question was going down the line of, I'm assuming that the entire 2013, all of those are closed.
2013, yes, that would be statute bars.
2014 are closed.
Those would be statute bar, correct.
2015, we have in our 2018 report, 23. Is that number still 23 right now?
I don't have the full documentation.
Wouldn't that be statute bar too, given the time? We are in
it would not be statute bar, but I would like to assure the PSC that those files would have been closed. If there was some files that were not closed, I think, in 2020, and I was given the excuse that it's because of COVID and all sorts of nonsense, and instructed that all files be closed. And I know for sure that they were closed. So there should be no files outstanding up to 2018, 2019. None. If there is any outstanding, it's simply because it's a court matter. Nothing else, because persons have been taking us to court for reviewing and these other things. Right. Right, or payment plans, of course. But we shouldn't have any files outstanding for 2020 for payment plan. There is a written rule that all payments must be completed within a 12-month period. So whether it's a payment plan or not, the only reason why it would be unclosed is because you are taking legal actions to collect the outstanding amounts, right? And we all know how the courts work.
This 2016 year, only one file was closed based on what we have before us.
What paragraph you're referencing?
The same paragraph, sir. 149 in 2017 and 163 in 2018, sorry. And only one file was closed in 2016.
I think somewhere along the line, the information is incorrect, because I'll tell you why. Every year, you have at least.
No. I think I stated what I said there incorrectly. The 2017 report is reflecting that 84 files were closed in 2016, right? The 2017 report is telling us that.
No,
That in
they said
2016
84 files were not closed.
Were not
Were not closed,
Right.
sorry, yes.
Right.
And that number reduced in the 2018 report by 1. So it come now to 83 were not closed, which means only 1, a difference of 1. 1 was closed between the period of 20.
You mean one file for the year 2016 was closed?
Yes.
In 2017?
Yes.
Well, right. Well, right.
But what was the purpose? How come only 1?
Well, because there are reasons why the files cannot be closed if there are outstanding taxes. Trust me, if there are taxes outstanding and the taxpayer cannot pay, a closure of a file, we need to recognize what a closure of a file means. A closure of a file does have no revenue-related implications. The file is closed when it goes around in the cycle and the cycle is completed. So the fact that the file may be open, it means that for one reason or another, it has not been closed, which would mean that it's either subject to court action, it's either the negligence of GRA officers for not bringing it up, and all of these other issues. Or it's either that you might decide based on opportunity cost that you concentrate your energies on other things other than closing a file because it has no revenue implications at all. So the fact that the file may not be closed has no revenue implications, but it needs to be closed so as to complete the audit. Yeah. And I agree that the Auditor General is correct when he's saying that all these files have been unclosed. He's right. And every time, as a matter of fact, I am sure when we would have checked this report, I would have actually boxed my guys up, get the files and bring it up to date. Right. So it has no revenue implications.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up. Paragraph 167 of 2018.
Paragraph what?
167.
167 of 2018. The condition storage of seized items came on the question. Could the Commissioner General bring us up to date on what improvements have been made at this bond, and that if items are seized and stored there, they could actually be kept at a saleable state and not being deteriorated and have to go to waste? What's going on in the public bond? I know you said earlier to dismiss the man who was in charge, so
yes.
Let me hear about the systems now. The man gone.
No, the systems, what has been happening is that prior to 2017, all cold storage and all this stuff were actually non-existent. And because of the non-existence of it, the GRA had they used to actually sell all of these perishables back to smugglers. So the smugglers used to utilize the same smuggled chicken, bring in more smuggling, and then there's some amount of legality to it. We stopped that by having our own cold storage in place. And I think we are encountering some problems with the cold storage presently now. But the one in Georgetown works properly. The one up there, it goes on and off. And we are trying to fix it. It's an ongoing exercise. So when we are not in a position to store it in Georgetown, no, we bring it to Georgetown and store it there. And we try to dispose of it as quickly as possible, either through donations or other things. We donate to the police or to the orphanages, the Ministry of Health, and these.
Do NGOs benefit from the donations as well?
What?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. It depends on it depends on a question of need versus want. The orphanages are needed.
Do NGOs benefit from the donations as well?
Well, it depends. If NGOs request. Well, we normally, based on requests, we would normally give.
So this is publicized.
What?
They see stuff whenever you decide.
No, it's a known fact. It's a known fact that we donate. We've been doing that.
So how do the public or say, for example, the orphanage or or non-governmental agencies, like NGOs, how are they aware that you have these things that they can be
by the time the perishables are available, if you do not dispose of it, you have to dump it. What happens is that from the time we may have a seizure of a perishable, we get the food and drug guys to ensure that it is fit for human consumption. Once we recognize it's fit for human consumption, we say, look, police, army, the Dharam Salah, blah, 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 this is available, drop it off there, the sign fit and we're done. Right. If people want to be on the list, all they have to do is to say they want to be on the list. The problem is that most of the places don't even have storage themselves. Facilities to store it. Right.
So what is the procedure of getting on the list?
You have
That's right.
You have the commissioner sitting right in front of you. That's right.
Okay, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to know, so who determines which organization get against which does not get? Are there guidelines?
There's a member of the PSC, Dr. Mahadio. He's on the virtual platform.
Okay, Dr. Mahadio. Yes, there are guidelines. And one of the reasons for the guidelines, prior to the donation aspect of it, what used to happen is that you used to sell the chicken on the open market. I think it was $5,000 or $4,000 per box or something like that. Recognizing that that was aiding and abetting the smugglers, because those were the guys who were actually buying the chicken. We said, no, we will not be selling this chicken anymore. We shall be donated to government agencies. And it's strictly government agencies that it was being donated to until we said, look, you know what? Let us ask your orphanages, the farms and all these people, and we decided to give them it. Right. So there are procedures as to how it is done. What I mean, we would not do it willy-nilly at all. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Remember, I tell you, bro.
Yes, sir. At 168.
2017 or 2018?
2018, sir.
Proceed.
The goods lodgement register. The Auditor General said that 2 seizures were done on the 14th of September 2018 and 1 on the 14th of October 2018. With taxes and fines totaling $1,952,000,000 and $436 million respectively. Which items seized are in the possession of the offenders and not the authority. Explain how that happens.
I would ask Mr. Board to do that. But the only way, Ms. Edger, it would be with the offenders and not the authority, because we do not have the storage for it. So what we do, we would make a stop, and he signs it in the register. He also signs the relevant paperwork. So in case he donates it, in case he utilizes it without the permission of the GRA, what would be the fines and all these other things? But I'll ask this more.
Right. So I believe the specific case which is referred to here, at the time the subject matter was investigated, it was not referred to as a seizure. Mainly the officers would have went to the alleged offender, conducted an inventory of the subject matter, and the offender was given specific time to produce the necessary documentation to prove that the item was lawfully imported. That is something at all times the authority is required to do, give the individual time to prove importation. It is only after the individual would have been able to prove importation, then it was moved from an exercise report to an investigation report. So at that time it was moved, it was explained to the auditors, and the file was submitted that at the time of this verification, it was mainly a verification to determine whether the subject matter was lawfully imported, and time was given to the individual. After the individual was unable, I would refer to him as the alleged offender, was unable to prove that the subject matter was lawfully imported, thereupon the taxes became due and payable. It was crystallized. So at that time, it was moved now to the investigation report, during which, of course, the subject matter remained at the premises of the offender. The offender said that in view that they are unable to pay the taxes, in view that they're unable to prove importation, they're asking for settlement in lieu of court proceedings. So that opportunity was given to them. They since paid all the taxes and all of the files were presented to the auditors. It was fully verified as stated in the reply therein.
So this last paragraph of the outstanding amounts has been remedied.
That's correct.
All right. So you're saying it's normal practice that when an exercise is conducted on the premises of an importer, if they are unable to provide evidence of full compliance with the Customs Act, they pay their duties and all the rest of it, that item becomes a suspicious item.
A suspicious item. That is depending on if the item is a prohibited item, of course it will be removed right away. If, however, it's an uncustom item, we're questioning whether duties and taxes were paid on it. Generally, an inventory of the specific item will be conducted. And of course, that person will sign to that inventory and they will be giving time which will be noted thereupon to prove that the subject matter was lawfully imported.
So we do that all of the time. For instance, if goods come through from Brazil, we know that it should not pass to the Corpacari area, but we find it in Georgetown. We now give that importer the benefit of proving to us that all the duties and the taxes were paid. And we allow them, once they sign the relevant forms, we allow them to keep the item. Because you know what happens when items are seized. We don't even have a bond to probably store them, right? So we said, okay, we give you.
I am not against that system. I'm not against that system, but because you're guaranteeing safety of both the importer and the GRA.
Yes.
But in the event of that individual not paying, like the Auditor General saying there was outstanding amounts, how do you enforce collecting?
We either enforce it through the courts, is number one, or number two.
So the documents that are signed gives you still the leeway.
Yes, sir.
Within a certain time, this matter is not settled, you could still resort to the court's action.
Yes, sir.
So you are covered.
Yes, we resort to the court, or we refuse, or we put on that the cost on that item when there's a new import. There are a series of things that we do. Or we could file Section 101 certificates to garnish and all sorts of things. We could withhold compliances for him and these things. So we're recognizing those are the opportunities that we have or the alternatives that we have. Most of the time, the taxpayer complies.
There are many ways to squeeze the taxpayer.
I wouldn't say so. There are many ways of expanding the tax base, not squeeze the tax. Right.
Covering all bases.
Yes.
Members, you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 145, 2017, 154, 2018. Mr. Chairman, liquor license is an approved estimate of 39.5 million in 2017 and 39.6 million in 2018. But the amount collected is 23 million respectively. So 23.7 in 2017, 23.6 in 2018. How does the agency come up with these estimates? First question.
Well, we would have estimated one based on changes in the Tax Act, number one. Number two, we would have estimated based on historical data. Now, if you look you're looking at liquor licenses and these things, if you would have checked and see what was collected in 2017, it was $23.7 million. If you see what was collected in 2018, it would have been 23.7 million, virtually exact, the same amount. So it would mean that somewhere along the line, there would have been some change either in the law or otherwise that would have made this historical data so distorted. Because consistently, you would have seen that over the years, it's the same amount that you would have been collected.
Right, but if that is the case, my question is that whether you have an approved estimator based on some historical number.
Yes.
So if the same collection is appearing year after year, would you want to reconsider the estimate you have?
I fully agree, you should.
Right, because I wanted to know if you're capturing less operators of these businesses in the net, or because there's certainly not less operators in the business. Right. Mr. Moore will tell you that.
No, what? No, as a matter of fact, there are more operators in the business that are doing it illegally. And that is one of the reasons why we would have introduced what you call a provisional license that would give them 2 years within which they should probably bring their house up to date.
That's a free license, a provisional one?
No. Always it's
conditional.
You pay. Yeah, you pay.
But it's not reflected in your collection.
I fully agree that something is wrong with the estimates. Because I cannot understand if you consistently in 2017 and 2018, you have the same, virtually the same amount that has been collected. You think what we have found also, even though at the end of April we send these demand letters out to persons who would have had licenses in the previous years, right? For you to get a license, you need to comply with all the requirements of the GI. You need to submit your tax returns. You need to do this. You need to also get a license from the fire service. Yeah. You need to get one from housing and all sorts of stuff.
Magistrate court.
Right. So on many occasions, persons do not take out their licenses simply because the other agencies have not been fulfilling their obligations. So even though we write them and said, this is what you got to do, it is not for, we do not police them as we should, because as you see, 39 is what? $39 million. $39 million, you would go behind one taxpayer to collect that versus going to 1,000 taxpayers for that. So you put your effort towards where you get a bigger return on investment versus on this. Because don't forget, licenses are fees, they're not taxes. And instead of running behind them, which the police should be doing, we go behind the other taxes. One taxpayer would pay us the entire license fee for a year.
But go ahead. I want to go on to another paragraph.
Yeah, I was just looking at whether they're not capturing the person, because that's why I mentioned the estimate. The estimate might have been related to a historical figure. And if there are slippages, you might want to look at that. But I fully agree that you won't run behind $1 million when you could spend the same amount of resources and collect 90. Right.
But what we do is that you need to recognize that the GRA utilizes a series of things. For instance, if you look at the Statistical Bureau information, you would recognize that there are more businesses that are operating in Guyana that are actually licensed. And what I mean, it's about twice the amount of persons that are operating that are not licensed. And what I mean, even though we've been sending law enforcement behind them and trying to get them in the net, sometimes it is better to allow them to grow rather than to shut them down so that you collect more taxes in the future.
Mr. Chairman, paragraph 173.
Chair, before, up to where you put, up to which paragraph you put to us in the 2018?
179.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Honorable Member.
Mr. Chairman, 173 of 2018. Could the Commissioner General explain to us how one-to-entry items are processed and disposed of, timings and everything else?
Mr. Moore, could you?
Yes. I will begin from when the subject matter has been imported. When the subject matter is imported, it's required to be clear within a specific time period.
What is that time period?
That time period is 14 days as set out under Section 89 of the Custom Act, Chapter 82.1. If it is not clear within that period, then it will be deemed want of entry cargo. When a subject matter is there, it is deemed want of entry cargo. The Revenue Authority will thereafter have it gazetted. When it is gazetted, the general public or any person expressing an interest, they have up to 1 month to come and lay claim. If no claim is made, the Revenue Authority will thereafter advertise. At all times, the auditors and the other agencies, of course, they are informed to verify this respective subject matter. The Revenue Authority would advertise it, giving the general public notice that we are disposing of these want of entry items via seal bids. And they are advised of the date where they can inspect and, of course, how they should place the bids. If after that process, after the general public express an interest in the particular subject, the authority will thereafter invite the auditors for the opening of the bids again. And the process is done with the auditors. That's our internal audit, the state auditors and audit departments and so forth, where it will be open and inspected properly. And of course, the highest, the want of entry subject will be will be disposed of to the highest bidder. Should be. All right, thank you, Seizure. I must say as well that at all times, the Revenue Authority has implemented or has a policy whereby the want of entry subject are generally donated to government agencies and so forth.
Good. So at 175, we had 71 vehicles or items were disposed of. 44 of the bidders honored their obligations. The Auditor General is saying we could not determine if the bidders of the remaining 27 vehicles honor their obligations. How do we get to the end of the process so that the Auditor General could be assured that the bidders honor their obligations?
Permit me to respectfully say that at the time this query was raised, all of the files were shown to the Auditor General. So we're quite surprised that this, of course, this specific, the number which you refer to still remain as a query. And I'm sure the Auditor General, the auditors them can verify that. All of the information, the files, and every single one, the entry subject was properly shown and verified by the auditors at the time.
AG, can you respond to the specific paragraph?
And those files are available for scrutiny, right?
Mr. Chair, my staff advised me that after the report was published, then we got the facts.
After it was published?
Yeah. So that's why it's still up. Maybe I got it before, we would have taken it.
Okay. All right. A follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, at 175. Earlier, the Commissioner General indicated to us that she found the practice that the smugglers were also the ones who were buying when they went to the open market. So we have a situation where the importers are the ones who are applying during the auction for buying the vehicles that they couldn't pay for in the original instance.
I would like, Minister, you have hit the nail on the head.
Well, I don't ask the question, I don't know the answer. You trained me, sir. You're
we would have unearthed whereby, and not only car dealers were doing this, but certain employees were doing it. And those employees were dismissed. The car dealers were doing it, so we decided that what we're going to do is that there would be no sale to car dealers. And the GRA must be able to recoup the taxes before those vehicles are disposed of. So there are many bids that used to come through, and the vehicles were not given to the highest bidder simply because they did not meet the threshold whereby you would have recovered the taxes that were due in the first place. So you were right. What I mean is that you would have seen, like, if there are 71 bids, sometimes some carry 50 of the bids you carry, the dealers are the highest bidder. And you would have found that they were also in collusion with some of the staff who would have been telling them how to do it. Right. So you had to change the entire system.
So you have taken action to weed out that practice?
Yes, sir.
So nobody could bring in a vehicle, allow it to go on to entry, wait for the bidding process on the bid on it, pay less for the vehicle and you would have paid in the taxes.
That system was introduced, but trust me, Chief, a few might fall through the cracks because I can't look at them.
I agree.
Right? but I could assure you that once I find anybody doing it, they are going to face.
But what would happen if a bidder is identified as the original importer? Do you allow the bid?
No, sir. We don't. We don't allow.
I could use my family's name though, but
yeah? They might put a third party to bid. Right. Right. Yes, exactly. Right.
Because this resulted in significant loss of revenue in the past.
Of course, yes, it did.
Because a lot of these things were high-end vehicles.
Well, I would, I think it is a myth for people to believe that people would bring in high-end vehicles and leave it at the wharf. And that has not been, we have not found that practice to be so. What we have found is that when persons recognize what would be the amount of the duty because of the CC and all these things, they would abandon the vehicle. But there is nobody who brings in a high-end vehicle and allows it to go asunder.
They find other ways.
Right. Yeah, sure they find other ways. And what I mean is that we need to make it clear that want of entry vehicles are a mere 0.5% of total imports. What I mean is it's not more than 100 or 120 vehicles.
Less than 1%.
Less than 0.5% of the vehicles. We had over 20,000 vehicles that were actually registered last year. There's only 100 and something vehicles that were on the water of entry list. Right.
Good.
Member Ziraj.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 173. I'm giving the Honourable Minister a chance to ask this question. Mr. Chairman, in the Auditor General report, it's not so clear whether stated here the status of 6 vehicles, if it's explained here that 2018. Yeah, 173. It is stated here that the status of 6 vehicles that were disposed of could not be determined. I noticed it's not clear from the write-up, the paragraphs are sort of hidden. So if the agency can respond to what is stated here in the audit.
The response is at 174.
At 174. It clearly stated there.
174.
Yes, it was answered.
Because the way it's written, it said in addition. So I'm reading that in addition to the 6, 2 are the vehicles and then 4 and so on. So right. This 2 and this 4 it's the same thing.
Yes.
At 176. Could we have some clarity here if this matter has been resolved? The owner of the vehicle was determined?
I think the query was vague and we asked the auditor for some verification there, but I'm not sure if those were provided to us. It was provided and resolved. I'm informed that it was provided and resolved.
Look at our response.
Yeah, it was provided and resolved.
Yes, it was resolved. Look.
I'm happy to hear it is resolved because to me, a query like this in the audit report, that GRA was able to determine the ownership at least when a vehicle is being imported, there's certain information that will have to be stated on the documentation that is coming.
Yeah, that vehicle was registered to GRA. Yes, it is actually a motorcycle. It is registered to GRA that we give the guys to use in the interior location.
Okay.
Right.
Members, I put paragraph 174 to 193 for 2017 and 179 to 209 for 2018 for our consideration.
Chair,
Member Maipoya.
I have a question on 208 and 209 of 2018.
Proceed.
And I see that the Auditor General
Re-migrant.
is flagging in para 209 A, B, C, D, E that basically there wasn't compliance with Act number 9 of 2016. And if for reiteration's sake, it states here that noteworthily 95% of the persons who were granted re-migrant status and benefits. Well, that one is not necessarily important. But 2 re-migrants who imported vehicles under this scheme did not own the vehicle for at least 6 months. And then, of course, the authority responded and said that the management of GRA provided information that one of the re-migrant met the ownership requirement. However, the other was granted administrative waiver based on his circumstances. When I read this paragraph, I saw that the Auditor General is saying one thing, and the authority is responding and basically providing and stating that there is factual evidence to basically dispel the Auditor General's finding. And this report is basically prepared after these findings were forwarded to the authority, and then they are allowed to respond before it comes into this book. And then the Auditor General makes a recommendation, and the Audit Office recommends that the authority monitor and administer all concessions granted in compliance with the established laws and regulations governing the re-migrant tax exemption scheme. My question is, if the Auditor General is saying 2 re-migrants who imported vehicles under the scheme did not own the vehicle for at least 6 months, and you as the authority, you are saying that you have, that one actually owned the vehicle and the other was given administrative waiver, and then there's another case of one re-migrant applied for a vehicle to be imported, but the document showed ownership by another person. And you responded by saying the management of GRA would like to inform the state auditor that there is evidence that the motor vehicle was in the name of the applicant at the time of obtaining re-migrant status. How does this fit into the Auditor General report as a query, given that the agency is responding and basically counter-arguing the findings of the Auditor General, if the AG's office can furnish an answer?
Just a follow up on Mr. Maipo's question with the Audit Office recommendation. It suggests or implies that GRA is not in compliance with the laws and regulations governing migrant tax exemptions, the tax exemption scheme. When GRA is saying we are in compliance.
Yes.
So it's a conflict there with the report of the Audit Office and GRA having to say, listen, we are doing what the law requires us to.
And if you look at D, sir, letter D, 2 persons were classified as re-migrants and received tax exemption, totaling 25.829 million. However, they were not Guyanese by birth. In addition, the husband of one of these individuals also gained re-migrant status and received tax exemption totaling $702,968. And the GRA is saying that the management of GRA would like to inform the state auditor that one of the re-migrant is a Guyanese by descent and the other applicant was processed via recommendation submitted from the Ministry of Citizenship. So I'm trying to understand that GRA, the audit office, found what I will say 4 discrepancies. I wouldn't categorize A as one. That speaks to the age of persons who were granted this exemption. And in these 4 discrepancies, the audit office, the authority, the Guyana Revenue Authority, they would have debunked all 4 with their explanation. And the wording of their explanation is strong enough for me to say that it's as though they did nothing wrong. So I'm asking, how does that still find itself in the Auditor General's report?
Yes, AG.
Mr. Chair, at the time when they gave us this explanation, they were to provide the evidence. When we checked the file, the information was not there. According to my officers, it said that we got it subsequently when we were doing the 2019 audit.
Okay, I understand. So these explanations that GRA gave, B, C, D, and E, it was given without the documentation to verify. So you put it in the report as what they would have said, pending them submitting the evidence to support. And subsequently, GRA did submit the evidence. So, and I heard you saying before also that GRA submitted some documents to verify another paragraph that we were looking at earlier. So is it a case that GRA is responding to these paragraphs in the form of providing the evidence a little too late?
No, not necessarily. So you need to understand that the process by which the Auditor General compiles his report. The Auditor General would take a year to do his report and ask you for a response within a month or 2 weeks. Right. These are things that one mean, as I've been telling the Auditor General, because he's a very good friend of mine, I think that we should be working together because we have an internal audit department and they will share their reports with him and all these other things. So I can't tell the Auditor General how to do his work. He does it how he's supposed to do it. But what we have to understand where the remigrancy is concerned. GRA, trust me, as far as we are concerned, we shouldn't even be doing the remigrancy stuff. The Ministry of Citizenship or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when they would have made their recommendations, we now have to go through it all. And you do not have to be a citizen by birth to get a remigrant.
No, but that's not the issue.
You could be the wife or the spouse of one, number one. Number two, you could be a settler. If somebody is settling in Guyana, they have the same rights as a
no, but my concern, CG, through you, the chair, my concern, CG, is I admire the fact that GRA was able to clarify the findings. The issue here for me is the timing in terms of the submission of the evidence to verify the claim that GRA puts as their defense. Okay. Now, my understanding of how the AG does his work is when they find these things, these paragraphs, when they find these anomalies, they would write or submit to the agencies indicating to them that these are our findings. Now, I am looking at 31st of December 2018 report, and this came out in September of 2019. So between, and the audit of this would have started sometime in February, March. So when they found these anomalies, they wrote GRA in 2019 and they requested GRA to clarify. GRA clarified in writing without the evidence to substantiate. I'm assuming that perhaps, and the AG can clarify, that they asked for the evidence and it did not come by the time this book was printed. So that's why I'm asking if there's a time factor or a communication breakdown.
I would most likely say a communication breakdown.
A communication breakdown.
Yes, because well, we enjoy cordial relations, number one. Of course, that AG always have a staff there, a permanent staff at the GRA. I sometimes think that she's a part of my staff. So it definitely has to be a communication with them. Right.
So I guess that ought to be addressed going forward so that we don't have a repeat of these instances where GRA is saying one thing, and when you read the report, the AG office is saying the other, but then the answer is before us, but we don't know that, which is that you did submit the evidence to show that this is not really supposed to be in this report. Because anybody, sir, that goes into the archive or go into the library or so and pick up a report and decide to just read the report and see this would never understand that there was clarity to this paragraph.
But if I can add, listen. Now, here the audit office is basically implying that for you to have this re-migrant status, you have to be a born Guyanese. And the GRA is saying, no, you don't have to be a born Guyanese. And here they're also recommending to GRA that the concessions granted should be compliant to the established rules and regulations governing the re-migrant tax exemption scheme. So it's either, in my view, based on this, how it is implied, is that the audit office is unaware of what they are even recommending to GRA to give consideration to, because GRA, based on their response, is compliant with what the re-migrant tax exemption scheme is saying. And they're also saying to the audit office, who is saying that essentially have to be a born Guyanese, they're saying, no, you don't have to be a born Guyanese. So it's either there's a lapse somewhere in understanding what governs the operation of GRA in its totality when the audit office is carrying out its mandate. Because GRA has responded to every claim that the audit office is making here to say that they are in a violation, but GRA said, no, there's no violation. So it's either the audit office is unaware in totality of the roles and function of GRA, given their powers by law. So because we should not have had this recommendation coming from the audit office when GRA is saying, no, we are in compliance. So I think there's need to be a more correlation with the two agencies before this report is concocted, because it gives a bad reflection in some regard of the audit office.
But sir, can we have a clarification on that particular D? Because the AG is saying in his finding that they received, however, they were not Guyanese by birth. And the GRA is saying that one was a Guyanese by descent and the other applicant was processed by a recommendation submitted by the Ministry of Citizenship.
And in GRA responding to that, can they also state why would they make such a recommendation to Guyana Revenue Authority, basically cautioning them to adhere to the laws and the regulation governing the re-migrant tax exemption scheme? And clearly they would have followed what the law says. So we can't have this reflected in this report.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chair, if I could help
Mr. Chair,
clarity.
Before, let me hear the AG.
If I could help for clarity, if in the Auditor General responding, he can state clearly, after his management letters are issued to the agency, how much time the agency has to respond to clarification.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
In terms of the Audit Act, all entities have a month into which to response. However, during the audit, we normally would send what we call a spot query to the responsible heads. And then we have a final meeting. I myself have this final meeting at my office with staff. That is where they're supposed to provide the evidence. And before I actually print this report, I also send back it for a sign-off. I can produce evidence, I have sign-off, but I will not get to that. What I said initially is that these documents were provided after this information. They did not give us at the time, so I have to write with it.
No, but that's understood, Comrade Chairman. But the point, the specific point here has to do with the finding of the AG by way of indicating that these two persons who were classified as re-migrants and receiving tax exemption, that they were not Guyanese by birth. And the authority is saying that one was a Guyanese by descent and the other applicant was processed via recommendation submitted from the Ministry of the Citizenship. So was this wrong? Was it wrong that they were that the person is a Guyanese by descent? And was it wrong that the other one was processed via recommendation submitted from the Ministry of Citizenship? Was that wrong?
No, it's not wrong.
So would you agree that the statement that they were not Guyanese by birth, the by birth part, is perhaps not necessary and should have said, however, they were not Guyanese, or in fact, the entire sentence should not have been there, because the fact is the by birth part to me is telling me as though you have to be Guyanese by birth before you can even be considered for these exemptions.
No, we are saying that if they are not Guyanese by birth, so therefore, if there's the other like citizenship or by descent, then you have to provide evidence. That is what we were saying. Maybe we should have gone on and said no other evidence was provided.
Yeah, but this gives the impression
that you got to be by birth.
Yes.
That's how I mean.
The wording is
two persons.
The language here is not the best concocted language. So it kind of gives you a different impression.
Yeah, but as I said, Mr. Chair, when I finish the management letter, I send it to the entity. The entity can.
No, but AG, the entity did respond. The issue has to.
No, but they could have. Correct.
Okay, they could have said that the person doesn't.
Which normally we do.
Because when I read it, I'm seeing two persons who are classified as re-migrants and receive tax exemption totaling 25.829 million. However, they were not Guyanese by birth. So, in addition, the husband of one of these individuals also gained re-migrant status and received tax exemption of 702,968. So, my interpretation of this is that you're not Guyanese by birth. GRA does something behind the books or underneath the carpet to give two people tax exemption. Then I go over to GRA's response and I see that they're responding, stating quite pellucidly that one is a Guyanese by descent. So their response by saying it's a Guyanese by descent, and the other one was processed via recommendation submitted by the Ministry of the Citizenship. They're telling me here that they did the right thing, and it is you who have stated the wrong thing. That's how I'm interpreting it, right? So I think sentence construction-wise, it sends a different impression to one. And what really is it that the law states? Who really states, what is it in the law? Is it by birth or by any means once you're a Guyanese? That is the kind of thing that we're trying to get at here.
Of the Customs Act is clear.
No, we get that. We get that GRA is correct. We get that GRA is correct. My contention has to do with how it's written in the Auditor General's report and the connotation or the interpretation or the perception that one receives when they pick up this book and read it, because this is not printed just for us here. This will be stored in a library and 100 years down the line still accessible to people and still accessible to persons who may want to do research and the likes. So in that context, I think it ought to reflect good in terms of what really one wants to get from it. So I don't know if AG understands good what I'm saying.
Even the recommendations.
As I said when I do my entry conference, and I can remember for 17 and 18, the staff actually came into my boardroom and we went through it. That is where they have the opportunity to point out certain things, right? If not, it will go.
Yeah, but even what is concerning for me is that the audit office is proffering a recommendation
which sends that message
to the Guyana Revenue Authority to correct the mishap that they would have entertained. GRA is saying, no, we have not had any mishap. And they are saying to GRA, you should be in compliance with the established laws and regulation governing the Re-migrant tax exemption scheme.
So this recommendation
Hold
should
on,
not
sir,
even be
hold
there.
on. But GRA is saying, I am the authority, and I am saying to you that I am in compliance with the laws and the regulation that govern this scheme. But here we have the audit office recommended to GRA something totally that should not even be a part of a proposed recommendation. So it's either before these recommendations are even put, there should be a correlation with what the law says before you put forward a recommendation, because this isn't good, in my view, for the audit office to have such a big lapse with regards to what the law says and what GRA would have been compliant with. So this recommendation, in my view, isn't even needed to be put to the Guyana Revenue Authority.
Chairman, if I may, I did ask the audit office to indicate how much time after a management letter is issued, agency has to reply. He said 1 month. And then there are actual engagements between the agency before writing. The clear question that I would like to ask the Commissioner General, because in a number of questions that I have put, these matters have been clarified or cleared up or been answered. When were those documents supplied to the audit office? After the 1 month period, after the writing of the report, when?
I would not be in a position to say so, sir. Neither would I give anything to the Auditor General. I think that the agencies work together. As a matter of fact, I'm of the firm opinion that this particular 209 should have been written to the Ministry of Citizenship and not the GRA. But the Ministry of Citizenship are the persons who would have made the recommendations and who would have signed those exemption letters. And I'm of the firm opinion that it's only because of some clarity that I would have responded. I could have said, go to the Ministry of Citizenship. Because if we follow every recommendation or every authority that comes from the Ministry of Citizenship or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you would have a lot more things going on here. It's just that we double check every single thing. Right. So what I mean is that I would not be in a match with the AG at all. I don't know when it was submitted, but all I know is that when we looked at this, we felt very concerned and peeved about it, and that is the reason for this response.
I thank you, sir, for that response, because I did hear a little earlier language use of a concocted report, and I was offended by such language, and that came from the chairman, because I think that's casting an aspersion on the audit office and his work.
I beg to disagree with that, sir.
Sir, can I come?
No, I will not. I am saying the information that was provided by the AG is what allowed him to put together his report.
You use the word concocted.
Concocted, put together is the same thing.
No, concocted means...
I cannot be blamed for the level of your
concocted
verbosity,
means
sir.
there's mischief involved.
No. That wasn't in the context of how it was used. It wasn't in the context of how to. And I took umbrage to what you're saying.
You use concocted and
I took umbrage to what you're saying. No, it's totally inaccurate.
But you
and I took umbrage to what you're saying.
Show that you said a concocted report.
And the context of how it was used, you are trying to put aspersion based on what I said. And you always try to do this.
You always try to do
and
what
it's
you did.
unbecoming.
Sir,
it's
you said the report
unbecoming
was
of you.
concocted. Let's get the verbatim and verify.
I am not refuting that I said the word concocted,
Let's
but
get the definition of
context,
concocted.
the context in which it was used, sir.
Concocted means
The context in which it was used. You're always out of place, man.
You can't tell me that.
You need to conduct yourself better.
You need to know the use of words properly. You
need to enhance the level of your verbosity so that you can understand what you're saying.
Mr. Chairman, you don't lecture me about language because you're totally out of order.
You are out of order.
Lecture me. You are.
So far, I don't think we need to go down this line. I believe that I believe that the issue at hand, as we're looking at it, I believe that there's a lot of miscommunication involved, and I understand the notation being made by the chairman as it regards the recommendation that came from the audit office. So, and I take notes of the points raised by the GRA in terms of the time period that they're given to actually respond to these. So there's a number of factors that needs to be considered in moving forward so that we are not at this point again. I believe that at one point in the discussion, it was said that the report was put together and yes, these responses were given. However, it was not accompanied by the relevant documentation to substantiate the responses itself, and hence the report would have been made as is. But I believe moving forward, we need to have that clarified so that we're not at the position we are at right now with basic things being stated here that could have been dismissed altogether instead of being placed in the report with just simply verification of documentation between the two bodies. So I don't think it calls for all of this heatedness at this point in time. I believe that we have been examining the audit office report. Yes, we give guidelines where we see necessary, but at no point in time do we have to or do we cast aspersions as to the intent by the audit office. So if we can move forward in an amicable way, I'll be most thankful for that.
So we keep doing the same thing and then we offer nice platitude and an explanation. We weren't doing it. So the Auditor General sat there and was under attack of writing a concocted report and then right platitude. Go ahead.
Mr. Ed, I'm right here, Mr.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I can hear you.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Don't keep doing it. Keep doing it.
Like again, I said,
acceptable. Keep doing it.
The member is out of order. You are. And I'm saying nowhere was the audit office put into disrepute. Nowhere was the audit office put into disrepute. I said based on the information, yes, and I you are out of place. I said you are taking what was said out of context. You are taking what was said out of context, and I pity you for that. We're moving on. I have never attacked the office of the Auditor General, and he's here and he can attest to that. You are out of place.
I'm a member of this committee, and I find it to be disgusting that repeatedly, whenever an issue arose about whose information is correct and whose information is not correct, aspersions are being cast on the Auditor General.
That is grossly inaccurate. Grossly inaccurate. Grossly inaccurate. Members, we put the remaining paragraphs for customs and trade and administration before the floor. So
I'm at paragraph 179, sir.
209 to 236 for our
Sir, I said I'm at
consideration.
paragraph 179.
Those paragraphs are before us, Honorable.
Mr. Chairman, I'm at paragraph 179. 179 was not closed. I've been waiting. Somebody jumped ahead to 209 because you put a set of paragraph from paragraph 175 to 209. I'm at paragraph 179.
Sir, I have 179 to 209 over half an hour ago.
I'm at paragraph
And I put
179,
into the
sir.
floor 209.
Mr. Chairman, I'm at paragraph 179.
The paragraphs before us, Honorable
Mr. Chairman, I'm at
members.
paragraph 179 and I have questions on paragraph 179. And I'm saying this paragraph has not been closed.
236. Those are the paragraphs before us.
Mr. Chairman, I'm at paragraph 179 and I have not been allowed to ask questions because somebody jumped ahead to 209 and I have not been able to ask questions on paragraph 179. And I will not sit here and allow you to move ahead when questions have not been asked in these paragraphs. That's what you want, but I won't. I'm at paragraph 179, sir.
Members, I would have put 179 to 209 for more than half an hour now.
And the discussion was on
And
208
we were
and
grossly
209 and I have
distracted
not
by
been
the
able to.
member trying to mislead this committee. I am putting
Mr. Chairman,
paragraph
I'm warning you.
209
I'm warning you for the last
to
time.
236.
I'm warning you for the last time.
I look like a
Using the
child.
language to impugn my
I look like
integrity
you, child.
is a serious matter.
I look like a child.
You're not a child, but you're an
Do I
idiot.
look like a child?
You're an idiot the way you behave. I'm asking questions by rushing through paragraphs.
Sir, could I make a statement on that? Sorry,
Please
I need to make a response on that. Sir, we sit at this committee and the answer will reflect that Mr. Edgel is allowed to ask questions extensively on every single paragraph that he wants. Mr. Edgel goes on and on, and if you check the answer, you will see that he probably asked the majority of the questions here. So for him to make those statements, it cannot be acceptable at this
It's
level.
out of place. And I'm happy that the public is viewing these proceedings to see the behavior of the honorable member. Members, paragraphs 209 to 237 is before us. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. I am a member of the committee. You're the chairman of the committee. Mr. Chairman, I think it's in all our interest to ensure that members get a chance to ask their questions. I don't think there's any harm done in allowing a member to ask a question.
And that was never done, sir.
Yeah, but
The honorable member
is saying
the
that he
honorable
didn't get a
member today, at today's proceedings, when the paragraphs are already passed.
When questions were already
When he came in
answered.
late,
When questions
we
were already
accommodated
answered.
him for
We went
more than
back.
half an hour to ask questions on paragraphs that were closed. So to make those statements is grossly inaccurate.
Mr. Chairman, the honorable member is saying that questions were asked at 208, 209. There was not a time during our discussion here that you had silence, that people sit and wait an opportunity to speak. And, it will be discourteous to interrupt someone if they're on the floor and all of that. I myself go back to paragraphs when others would have gone ahead, and I see that there's
Any paragraphs
I
are
don't see there
open,
any
honorable
danger in
member.
us going back. I mean, it's all towards scrutiny.
Members, again, I repeat the paragraphs before us, 209 to 236.
I will not be silenced by you.
You don't want to silence. You don't want
to.
Members, the paragraphs are before us. Do we have any questions for the members?
Repeating again, I have questions on paragraph 179.
Those paragraphs are closed.
Mr. Chairman, I have questions on paragraph 179. It was 179 was never closed. You put 179 to 208. Questions were asked on 208, and I have questions on 179.
I put paragraphs 179 to 209 for more than half an hour. And I am putting to the committee 209 to 236. Those are the paragraphs that are open for our consideration.
Come on, don't get too high.
The attempt to rush these things and to hide examination is being repeated by me over and over because it's the same practice that is being employed at every agency. They got nothing to do with very hard. There's intent in this.
Members, do we have any questions for the honorable members before us?
Mr. Chair, could you open the remainder of the paragraphs, please?
Those are the remaining paragraphs for Customs and Trade Administration. Yes, those are the paragraphs that are open, 209 to 236.
Chair, 235 you said, or 236?
Yes.
I see the Auditor General is guiding us in terms of what controls have been put in place to ensure that applications for VAT returns, refunds, are processed and paid in a timely manner. And has this exercise been completed? This is with reference to paragraphs 193 in the 2017 report and 235 in the 2018 report.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to respond to that. Is that over the years, there were lots of outstanding VAT refunds that were not timely paid. And during the course of last year, we brought it up to date up to the end of September, where we paid just over $9 billion in VAT refunds. So it was an ongoing exercise, which was actually completed last year.
Thank you, CG. Sir, 230 of 2018. I see that the AG is asking for guidance in terms, and of course, I'm following his guidance here. What controls were put in place to have defaulting taxpayers file their returns promptly and comply with the requirement of the Act? And are the controls now in place yielding positive responses from taxpayers? 230 of 2018.
It's an ongoing exercise. What you would have found is that there were changes in the law whereby you would have increased the threshold, and as such, that is one of the reasons why there were less registrants in 2018 versus 2017. That's why. Number two is that it's an ongoing exercise whereby we send our officers out to ensure that those who are registered for VAT, those who should be registered for VAT are registered. We also, when we look at the financial statements of companies and individuals, when we recognize that they are above the threshold, we actually register them for VAT also. So it's an ongoing exercise.
Thank you, Seizure.
Any other questions, honorable members? And for the benefit of who are here, the meaning of the word concocted means to make up, prepare by, or put together. And the information provided to the AG, he concocted his report by putting together those information. So I don't understand what negative position the honorable member was alluding to. Members, we'll move on to internal revenue. There being no other questions. And I put paragraphs 194 to 204 for 2017 and paragraphs 237 to 247 for our consideration. The floor is open, members.
Yeah.
Member Maipoya.
What's the closing paragraph for 2018?
237 to 247, internal revenue, those are where we are. For 2017, 194 to 204. 237 to 247.
I'm looking at para 200, 202 of 2017 and 243, 246 of 2018. In terms of, I see here from 1,997 forms to returns submitted by employers, the authority failed to examine 453 returns. A total of 331 returns examined had variances when compared to Form 5. Can the authority explain what this is really about? And in 2018, I see 17 instances were noted where returns had variances.
The returns would always have variances. When the employer submits a return, which is due on the 28th of February of the following year, what we normally do, we carry out a reconciliation exercise. Reconciliation exercise entails you what we call balancing the Form 2.
Just for my own clarity, this is like if a person is employed by a firm and that income tax return that they have to fill out?
No, the form submits an employer's return. Which would state all of the employees, the respective amounts that they would have worked for, the allowances and taxes that they would have paid, together with the TIN number. GRA now goes through the process of reconciling and verifying that versus the payments that they were made either on a monthly or a quarterly basis. And after that has been done, we go through the process now of paying the employees their refunds if any. That's what goes on here. We have been trying to advise and we have asked employers to submit the Form 2s, we call it Form 2s or the employer's return in electronic form. Because as long as it's submitted in electronic form, it makes life easier for us to do the reconciliation. But we have not been able to do so except for a few big companies who have been doing that. Right? So it is like you virtually have to go through. For instance, half of the time that a return or an employer's return would not balance or be reconciled is because it's in parts. for example, region returns for the government employees versus like the Gaisuko returns and these things. So half of the time that a return would not be balanced or reconciled is simply because the payments are jumbled up between branches and between regions. So that is what happens here.
So is there any way that measures or steps can be taken to have these returns promptly examined and reconciled?
Well, what has been happening, whether they have been promptly examined or not, I have taken the decision whereby as long as the payments have been received and whether the returns are balanced or not or reconciled or not, we go ahead and pay the taxpayer the refunds. So there is no reason why a taxpayer would not get his refunds because of the inability of the GRA to fully do their reconciliation.
So what do you outline some of the reasons that causes the GRA from not being able to timely reconcile?
Most of the time, as I said, it's either government institutions that we are unable to reconcile, or regional institutions, and simply
that are also government oriented.
You write them and you do not get the response. They do not do anything because we need to recognize the state of affairs of our accounting. Until IFMAS was, now IFMAS is getting it a little better where payments are effected through the Ministry of Finance. But for many of the regions which do their own accounting,
they're still using IFMAS?
Yeah, they're still using it. We have been able, as a matter of fact, we've been able to utilize that system to pay thousands of refunds last year.
So we're using IFMAS and IFMIS is what?
I think the transition from IFMAS. Transition from IFMAS to IFMIS.
Yes.
And that doesn't make it better.
Well, it makes it better if that particular region goes through it. But many of the regions are still self-accounting. And in this particular year, said 2017 or 2018, there were. Yeah, the Ministry of Finance is now improving upon it, and more as divisions are being added. Right.
I see in para 197, 199 of 2017 and 240, 242 of 2018 that a number of self-employed persons did not file tax returns. And I see in 2016, 73,989 active registrants did not file their tax returns. I see also in 2018, 82,986 persons did not file returns for 2018.
Right.
These are huge numbers,
right,
in comparison to the workforce of our country.
You know, I have made a statement before and I'm going to make it again. What has happened here is that many persons who are claimed to be self-employed, in this list, they are not on the rolls. People get a TIN number, a TIN certificate. And if they're not ranked as employees, they go into the self-employed. So most of this list that are here, and we have explained this, relates to persons who have driver's license.
Or housewives and
housewives
who need that TIN number to go and do their business.
Go to the bank and these places, right? So, and they're under the threshold and all sorts of stuff.
Can this number therefore be disaggregated to show who fall within which?
Yes, we are actually doing that now with our new system that we are putting in place. Our new revenue management system. This would be something of the past.
Okay.
Right. Because we are going straight to the next code, the North American Industrial Code. So we'll be in a position to know exactly.
So can you supply us therefore with a disaggregated, with a disaggregation of these numbers so that we can able to see who are the people who are actually self-employed that did not file their income tax return?
When we would have done the transfer, the new RMS system, that would be available. But the truth is, out of this 79,000 or whatever that is, this entire figure here, it would be closer to 5%. or 2%.
Of people who are actually self-employed.
Yes, exactly. Right. Because when you take into consideration, take for instance, a Trinidadian comes to Guyana. He needs a Trinidadian, he needs a Guyanese license. He has to get a TIN. Now, he gets the TIN, and instead of, because he is not employed, he's not an employee, it falls into that category. So we have to break out that entire thing. And we are at the point of doing that now.
Thank you.
Right.
For those who are in the fixed establishment, did you discover that a lot of these persons didn't file income tax return? And if so, is it a matter of them not knowing how to do it?
Well, the fixed establishment, you're talking about employees?
Yes.
But employees, once there are many employees who do not file, and the law has changed to allow them not to file. Because unless you are going to get a refund, or unless you have to pay taxes, it's a waste of time you're filing. And we have changed it. Right. Years ago, we used to ensure that they file, and we used to fine them for not filing.
So you no longer have to file?
If you fall under the threshold, you don't have to file. And the threshold is what now? 780,000. The new one is 900,000 now. Right. So you don't have to file, but the GRA could demand it in case when we use other records and third-party information. As long as we recognize that you need to file because you have other sources of income, we demand that we would demand that return from you. But once you're an employee, note that an employer's return is submitted on your behalf. So we know exactly based on your TIN number that would have been submitted by the employer, what would have been your income. And then we say, okay, well, there is actually no need for you to file.
And that filing will only be even if the person has several jobs once it's above the threshold.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, I've got another report on it. Yeah, that went in.
Members, I put 204 to 214 for 2017, 247 to 257 for our consideration.
Sir, I see 205, 206 of 2017 and 253 of 2018 corporation tax. I see a number of companies, they are not filing their returns. Can the CG provide us with?
That's 253 is set for 2018?
Yes.
Well, if a company that doesn't file its returns, we normally would demand that return. As a matter of fact, we are in constant touch with the registrar of companies, which enables us. This figure here is a lot smaller than what the registrar of company has. But many of these companies, they're either dormant, they've gone out of existence and these things, or defunct. So what I mean is that I agree that there are some of them that has not been filing. We have actually taken court action against a lot of them because once you do not file by April 30th, we would have generated a list and sent it to the legal department for us to take court action against them if we do not demand those returns or if we demand them and they're not submitted with it. We had tried a few years ago to accept a return because the auditors have always complained that they do not have enough time to finish those returns so that they could file it by the end of April. So what we did, we said, look, we are going to accept draft accounts by the end of April, and then you file your audited accounts by the end of December. So since then, that has improved the filing rate versus the previous year.
So how you have a lot of these companies that are defunct basically enough, how do you get rid of these numbers, or you reduce these numbers so it doesn't create that perception?
Well, we have to be in constant touch with the registrar companies to know those that have been stricken off the rolls. What most of these companies that have not filed are actually one-man companies. Okay. Right. So what I mean is that instead of being self-employed, they go a man, he registers the company, and what I mean is little or no income, so he doesn't file. But the major companies have been filing and have been filing timely and have been paying their taxes.
Question, CG. What about registered businesses? You're doing all that is required to make your submissions to GRA, and you fail to re-register your business, and another person goes with your business name. How do you deal with that? Because every year you gotta re-register your business.
Right.
For example, there's a company, a business in Linden, Denwar Bakery. They would have lost their business name, even though it was in existence for some time, to another company, because they would have failed that year to re-register the business. Another guy indicated to me he would have had a contracting company. His name was taken by another company, another business that went and registered the same name for the business. So how do GRA deals with scenarios of this nature when this business was reporting to you all the time and they miss the registration for that year and someone else comes with it? How do you deal with that?
Well, when someone else comes with the same business name, we would have utilized the TIN numbers for that individual. Don't forget a business name. We utilize the individual TIN for that person. But if he does not re-register with the registrar, unfortunately, GRA can't do anything about it. But when they come to us to register it, we said, no, this business was registered already under this TIN number. And as such, you cannot use that business.
But that's where I wanted to get some clarity on, because they get their TIN in that business registration that they lose the following year. So when that business comes to you with a TIN number, I mean, then the registrar and GRA should have a relationship, because that guy no longer owns that business name because he would have failed to register it. But then the guy who has the new registration can't get it in, so how we really operate?
Well, is his failure that we make he get it? He should ensure that.
No, but you just indicated it, CG.
Right, I agree. No, I am telling you this. Once he comes in to register that business, and we recognize that business already is registered under another person's TIN, we would not register that business under his TIN. But what we normally do is as I said, we are constantly in touch with the registrars and all these people. Hopefully, we'll be able to share each other's database, and then it will make life easier.
Yeah, because I don't think the registrar would do that. I don't know.
Right?
But I think it's an issue that could be...
For you to register a particular business name, you make an application and there is a search process to ensure that nobody else has that business name.
But that's the thing. The person has it, but when the next year for them to re-register, they go late and someone beat them to the punch and take the name. So I'm saying it becomes an issue because that same person is handicapped to some extent because he can't get a TIN to operate his business because it was registered before with GRA. So how do we in the future correct this problem?
It has to work in association with the registrar.
Yes.
Chair.
Proceed, Member Mike.
Sir, I see that the Auditor General
What's
is
the paragraph?
207 for 2017 and 254 and 55 of 2018. And a number of companies, I see in 2017, 60 files for companies making tax payments were not presented for audit. Scanned copies of returns were also not presented for audit. And I see in 2018, 270 company returns files were not presented for companies making tax payments. I'm assuming this is hampering the Auditor General's work in terms of their audit. Can the Commissioner General say what is causing these files to not be presented for audit?
Well, I would have hoped from since then it was presented, because what we have done for over the last few years, we would have invested in a data management software, which enables us to scan all tax returns as they come in. So those are.
But what caused the AG to not have these files when in the years that he would have asked for them?
Well,
for example, 2017, 60 files for companies making tax payments were not presented for audit. Right. What caused these files to not be presented?
Could the Auditor General tell us how many files he requested? And why 60? What I mean is that I find it, exasperating that you would tell me that 60 files cannot be submitted.
I see in
because once you have the time, once you get a request for those files, it ought to be presented to the Auditor General.
I see in 2018, it says here, the authority continues to have difficulties in retrieving taxpayers' personal files. A request was made on the 10th of June, 2019 for a sample of 270 returns, files in respect of companies making payments totaling 24.551 billion for corporation tax during the period under review. But at the time of reporting in August 2019, the files were not presented for audit. Similarly, in 2017, 60 files were requested, of which 43 were presented in September of 2018. As such, 17 files with payments totaling 84.118 million remain unpresented. At the time of reporting in September 2019, efforts are being made to present the files for audit examination. I am asking, if the Auditor General's office is requesting a particular number of files, what is causing GRA to not be able to submit what is requested?
Yes, I would like AG to clarify that, because I'm of the firm opinion that as long as a file is requested, it should be presented. And what I mean is that I'm aghast that you are saying that those 17 files were not presented on these things. Because, trust me, I would like AG to go to
but
those
this
files.
is in the report, and I'm...
Well, I agree it's in the report. And as such, I'm wondering whether those files were presented after the report was written.
No, but I heard you indicating just now that you were, well, if I'm to use, I'm not using your word, but you somewhat express a degree of being flabbergasted.
Yes, I am.
The report.
I am, because
so I figured that you saw this report.
I do not understand why the files would not. As a matter of fact, I would have told my staff to make every effort to locate those files and to hand it over to the Auditor General.
254.
Right.
So
look, facts are facts. And if these files are not presented, I would like to have a list of these files to ensure that they are presented to the Auditor General.
No, but that shows a communication.
So AG, you have the files. He has the files.
So AG, may I ask when the files were presented to you?
For 2017, in prior.
Could you state your name for the clerk?
My name is Shondell Thomas.
Pardon?
Audit Shondell Thomas. For 2017, in 2018, 43 files was presented for 2017. For 2018, as of today, they were not presented. This list was submitted time and time again to different managers at different points, and at this time, none has been presented for 2018.
Yes, so it doesn't change, Comrade Chairman, from what is in
So it would
the
definitely have to be a communications lapse. I would like to be told who the list was presented to, so I could take the relevant action against those officers that did not present those files.
But CG, I am somewhat sensing that this is the first time you're hearing this. And it bothers me.
It's not the first time I'm hearing it. When I read the report to the first instance, I instructed that the files was to be presented to Audit General.
And clearly it was
I
not.
instructed my deputy to ensure that the files are presented.
And clearly you're hearing now that it was not.
All right. Well, that is why I would like that list, so that I will ensure that the files are presented. Right, because even if the physical files are not there, the scanned copies are available. Because we have scanned all.
But let me ask this now. Let me ask this now. Before we came here for this audit examination, there was a briefing that took place before we ended up here between the AG's chamber and the AG's office and the Guyana Revenue Authority.
Right, and the Ministry of Finance.
And exactly, for preparation. And I'm sure this paragraph came up there also. AG?
I can't remember all the paragraphs, but we did went through them.
But we went through the paragraphs that had to come here for examination. So I think that the communication breakdown is one, but hearing your answer also, CG, tells me that you have given the instruction, which apparently was not followed.
Well, right, that is why I would like to have a paper trail as to who the files were requested from and why it was not conformed with. Because trust me, I'm an auditor by profession also, so I understand the importance of having these files.
So I trust going forward now, the AG will communicate with your office so that you'll be aware of the files that are yet to be presented for 2018. And I believe the number that they speak to is 270. And there are some files that are yet to be submitted for the year 2017 that ought to be submitted also.
I would also like AG to give me a list of all the files that lead up to the end of last year. So I'll get it all.
Okay, so AG, can you provide the CG with those information before the week concludes, so you can get that information?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In fact, I've just given my staff instruction to present up to the present report 2020.
So from 2018 to 2020, all the files that you would need.
Yes.
Now that speaks to those paragraphs which has to do with corporation tax.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a similar issue here with property tax.
Well, all the files would be together. So if once you get that file, you'll have the property tax and the corporation taxes.
Okay, so all two AG can be incorporated and submitted. So
all the file that the AG needs, he can make. CG saying can make requests for it.
Yeah, but let's not run from what is the issue here. The issue here is that requests were made,
That's
but
understood.
not satisfied. And now the AG is going to do the request again. So the expectation from GRA is that the AG's requests will be met. I just want to have that on the record.
No, I would like to make it plain and say that as long as I get that list, it would be given to the AG, all of us. Right. I think somewhere along the line, there have been some
miscommunication.
No, not miscommunication. I think somewhere along the line, some of my staff and the AG staff might not be seeing eye to eye.
All right, so moving forward, CG, the AG has committed to make his request to you before the week concludes, and I believe you will also provide them with all that
Yes,
before
I
we
will.
come.
I will.
From 2018 to
2017 onwards.
to 2020.
Yeah.
To 2020.
Yes.
Good. So I think that will definitely help.
Especially when the thing is thing.
Members, I put paragraph 214 to 224 and 257 to 256 for our consideration.
Sir, para 217 in 2017 and 263 in 2018. May I ask for an update on the court matter and how is it going there?
The court matter is yet to be heard, despite efforts to have it heard. We are dealing here with portions of the same fraternity. So that might be one of the reasons why it is yet to be heard.
I see in para 267 travel tax that there's a difficulty with airlines.
That's 2018.
2018. I see that there's a difficulty with reference to airlines submitting their returns. And I see that the returns submitted by 6 airlines revealed a variance of 5.414 million between the amount declared on the declaration form and the payments made. Letters were dispatched to the airline to clarify uncertainties, and demands were issued for outstanding payments where applicable. Can we have an update on that paragraph?
Paragraph 267.
267 of 2018. And I think there's a link to paragraph 268 also, CG. So if you can incorporate the answers for both.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, but what has happened? Yes, yeah, Mr. Chairman, both matters have been resolved. The relevant taxes due were paid, and the matters been resolved on that, and this would not be included in the later report by the general in both instances.
So, like instances where these paragraphs are cleared like that,
yeah,
the AG's office is notified.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And paragraph 220 and 221 of 2017. Travel voucher tax collections were below the budget because several airlines made no payments in 2017. What is the status of this paragraph?
The next paragraph, sir?
220 and 221 of 2017.
Well, right. You know, it is. Well, I mean, we would have given that information in the response, because what we said is that 2 airlines that paid travel voucher taxes operations in 2017. Right. But one of them would have been the Dynamic, and the other one would have been Flight Jamaica. Those 2 ceased operations. Correct.
Sir, para 225 of 2017 and 276 of 2018, an airline that operated during the period July 6, 2013 to 6th of June 2015 failed to remit travel voucher tax. and in 2018, an airline did not remit travel voucher.
Mr. Maipa, to what for 2017?
225.
No, we haven't gone there.
Oh, my apologies.
We are 224. 267.
Okay.
Okay, so members, I put paragraphs 224 to 234 and 267 to 277.
So, sir, I go to the same para I was referencing. 225 in 2017, an airline that operated during the period 6th of July 2013 to the 6th of June 2015 failed to remit travel voucher tax. And in 2018, an airline did not remit travel voucher tax for the entire period of operation. Is it the same airline we're speaking about here in 2017 and 2018?
No, sir. The one of the airline the one that was in 2017 was on Visa, right? On the Visa Airlines. Right. That is the one that we're talking about in 2017.
As a domestic or international?
International, because international, the travel tax is only due on international travel. So it was international.
And the 2018 one?
The 2018, that is which paragraph again, sir?
276.
276. Yes, it's the same airline because it's the same period. It's the same airline.
Oh, so it was just referencing back in 2018.
So what has happened since then, sir, is that we have instituted what you call a bond to ensure that this does not recur again. Because in actuality, the airline would be collecting what you call trust funds on behalf of the Guyana government, and if they do not remit it, and especially if it's a fly-by-night airline, like how this one was, you're going to lose that tax. So we institute a bond which would amount to 2 months, I think, a month and a half of operation.
So the bond was instituted to not have a reoccurrence of situations like this.
Yes.
But not to go back on any paragraphs, but I did see in paragraph 222 of 2017 that only one of 8 airlines with flights originating from Guyana had a bond in place.
Right.
And the airlines did not submit the bond to the authority. So
right, but no.
Is that 2 separate issues we're talking about?
Yeah, no, it's 2 separate issues, yes. But there's a reason why all airlines do not have to submit a bond or to have a bond. The law says the Commissioner General may require, for instance, Caribbean Airlines would not have a bond. And that's because it's a government arrangement.
Okay.
American Airlines, they would have a bond because of what they're in. JetBlue, once an airline, like the Dynamic, they would have to have a bond. Eastern would have to have a bond. After we would have seen what would have occurred with the fly-by-night airlines. Unless you're an established airline, we do not waive the bond, or unless we get instructions from the cabinet to waive the bond. All airlines have to put up that bond. Right.
Thank you, CG. Sir, para 226 and 274 for 2017 and 18 respectively. I see from 2014 to 2016, one airline owed penalties and interest amounting to 44.259 million. The airline did not make good on its promise in October of 2016 to pay monthly installments of 3.688 million to settle the debt. And in 2018, the penalties and interest totaling 44.259 million remained outstanding for the years 2014 to 2016. What is the current status of this?
It's still like that. This would have been an airline that I think it would have been Incel airline that no bond was in place. So by the time we took them to court, they would have already we went into bankruptcy.
So there's no way of getting this
No,
money.
the airline was owned by the Aruban government, and we have since written the government because the government should have guaranteed those debts. We have since written the government to request that debt. We have also had another airline whereby we went to court in the United States for debts because they did not have a bond at that point in time. These amounts were due prior to the bond being put in place. It is based on past experience. That is why I instituted the bond hereafter.
So if there is no way of retrieving this money or getting this money, so as to not have it as coming again and again and again, what can be done there, AG, to bring closure to these paragraphs? In an instance like this, where we're talking about since 2014 to 2016.
I will have to write him and ask him to take the debt off. Okay,
so as
the Commissioner General got certain powers, so all he got to do right there.
Okay.
And
so you have to be sorry.
That hasn't passed the statute bar, or is there a statute bar for that?
Not the statute bar for trust funds. Problem is that I don't want to write it out for the books until all efforts are failed.
Yeah, I was going to say you have to be satisfied.
Right. Yes, right.
That all measures were taken. Sir, 227 of 2017, the authority failed to collect 3.770 million in penalties and interest from 2 airlines that did not promptly remit travel voucher tax. So, and I see that the amount of 1.964 million is currently outstanding, which means that they did pay a percentage of what was owed. Right. And I see that demand for payment of this amount was dispatched and is currently being monitored. So they are paying, but it's just at what rate they're paying.
Yeah, they are taking their own time. Okay.
Which airline is this, may I ask?
Yeah. But what I mean, I think there was one airline that wasn't paid. It would have been the total.
I prefer, Chair, that instead of us just assuming the name, if you can provide it with confidence.
Right. Sure, I will. Yes. Right.
Would a week suffice, AG? See. Would 1 week suffice?
Yes. We could have that done for tomorrow because it's public knowledge. Right.
CG, would it be COPA, according to our records?
Yeah.
COPA?
Well, the dice, yes. The dice were what I said, yes. Yeah.
So there's no need to
there's no need for
right. It's them. What I mean is that they had some taxes outstanding for a long while, and then we got them to actually pay it up. And that is how the penalties would have occurred for late payment, penalties and interest.
I see in para 228 and 229 of 2017, it states here that the failure of the authority to finalize 476 cases resulted in the inability to collect potential taxes and penalties amounting to 14.004 billion and 386.923 million respectively. From 2008 to 2016, the authority is yet to finalize 336 cases, thus hindering its ability to collect potential taxes and penalties amounting to 3.883 billion and 82.927 million respectively. And in 2018, I see the AG is saying in para 277 and 278 that management was still to finalize 479 cases where taxes and penalties in dispute amounted to 17.239 billion for the year 2008 to 2017. And in 2018, 1,579 cases were not finalized, which resulted in the inability to collect potential taxes and penalties amounting to 5.222 billion and 90.730 million respectively. So how or what steps are being taken to have cases dealt with in an expeditious manner?
Note the words in dispute.
Yeah.
Right. In dispute doesn't mean that the taxes are crystallized. Taxpayers would have disputed the assessment. Now, how does an assessment arise that the taxpayer would object to? Is that most of these assessments are raised in absence of returns, where the taxpayer failed to submit his return on a timely basis. Thereafter, the taxpayer submits his return and he objects to the assessment. So what you need to do now is to go through the objection process, and then you finalize the objection. We have been, and trust me, note what he said here about one government corporation and 4 companies at any point in time. I would like to call the name of the government the corporation, right? Nor the 4 companies. But the truth is that sometimes if it's a government corporation and it's an assessment raised in absence of return, what I mean is that in many instances, there are no taxes that would be due. Right? So, what I mean, it is in dispute, and that is the reason why. I agree that we should be looking at it more on a timely basis, and we are actually doing that now.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, member.
Looking at paragraphs 230 to 232 in 2017 and 279 to 281 in 2018, I'm noticing that the authority basically overestimated by 20 million in 2017, and then there was an overestimation by 10 million in 2018. However, what is a little alarming is that the reason being for the collection difference there is because 3,484 persons did not renew their trade and miscellaneous license in 2017. We come into 2018 and I see the number being 3,486 persons, practically an identical number of persons did not renew their trade and miscellaneous license. We're just seeing that difference between the 2 years is just basically 2 persons. Why is this number?
Well, the law would have changed. The law, for instance, officers are no longer, that used to be taking out license, are no longer required to take out license. So if there's a change in law, unfortunately, I mean, we should have been able to advise the AG that there's a change in law and such these persons should not be taking out their licenses anymore, right?
So there should not be expected to come in and apply altogether.
Right. They don't have to take it out anymore. Right.
Two persons added to that list.
You see, sometimes, and I keep saying it all the time, it's a case of opportunity cost. These 3,000 persons that did not take out their licenses, that is a mere what, $9 million or something. Would I run behind 3,000 people to take out for $9 million when I could go behind one person and collect it? Right. But what we would do is that we would actually send out notices. What we have found, and I don't know why it's that. What we have found is that 50% of all letters leaving the GRA returns by return post. Nobody wants to accept a letter from the GRA. So we have now begun to send letters in plain envelopes. As long as they see Guyana Revenue Authority on site, they don't live there anymore when I charged. Right?
I'm looking and I want to know if the same response probably is going to fit here for paragraph 233 in 2017 that says, despite the continuous decline in revenue collection and the increased number of defaulters, measures were not put in place to have defaulters renew their license. How do you respond to this?
What we normally do, we send out letters to persons who would have not taken out their licenses by the end of April. Every year. Right? Some of them come in, some of them don't come in and take it out. Right? Because because you have to get a compliance, you have to submit your returns at the end of the year before you can renew your licenses. Persons have not been submitting their return, and that is how they are reneging on their license renewal. Now, for me to go on a countrywide exercise to ensure those persons renew it, the payment of the staff alone exceeds what we are going to collect.
Doesn't make sense.
So it doesn't make sense to go there and actually get them to comply because, it's opportunity cost. Your return, your investment alone. For instance, we had an office at Bakari. The amount of money you pay your staff there to run an office does not mean you don't even collect the taxes. So you close the office down. Simple. And you do spot checks. So that is how we have actually been looking at it after we've done a cost benefit analysis.
Sir, Mr. Chair, the paragraph that you have put goes up to 234.
So yes, members, I put all of the remaining paragraphs for our consideration. From 234 to 251 and 277 to 308. The floor is open. Go ahead, member.
234, sir. 234 toward 2017 original legal license.
234, you said?
234, correct. 107 defaulters did not renew their legal license, resulting in the authority failing to collect the fees for fees of, well, I guess this is going to be a similar response. I can preempt this response, sir. I want to preempt this response. It makes no sense for you to utilize resources. The opportunity cost is too great.
Exactly. What we actually do is spot checks.
So spot checks are done here.
Yes, we normally do spot checks and we send people up and we work along with the police. Many of the time what I mean is that we can't do it all by ourselves. So we work along with the police and we ask the police to also make checks because they also are required under the act to do this.
Okay.
Right.
Moving to 235, legal confirmations, the authority did not submit confirmation from its contracted legal counsels of all judgments, litigations, and claims involving the authority. And in 2018, 283 to 284, it says in 2018, the authority incurred expenses totaling 53.4 million for 12 cases. I think it's the two coincide with each other.
234 and what?
235 in 2017. And in 2018, it's 283 to 284.
Right. Okay. Well, the one with 283 and 284, those payments amounted to cases that we would have fought in front of the CCJ, and we would have won a case for $3.2 billion. So the legal fees failed in comparison to the taxes that we would have.
The legal fee was?
The legal fees of 53 million pails. In comparison to the judgment that we would
the judgment was
$3.2 billion. Right.
CG, for seized liquor and alcoholic beverages, are those sold only to liquor license owners?
Yes, those are so only to liquor license.
Noted.
Chair.
Go ahead, Member Michael.
So I see 287 of 2018. That the escrow account that is used as a holder of potential revenue due to seizure matters continues to increase in its closing balances. For the years 2016, 17, and 18, the closing balances were 331.918 million, 514.873 million, and 1.165 billion, respectively. And during the year under review, the authority closed 257 seizure files with estimated revenue collections of 332.881 million. And the conclusion is that these monies are not being deposited into the consolidated fund bank account on a regular basis or in a timely manner. I do take note of the fact that the authority indicated or explained that a comprehensive review of the deposit made to this account was undertaken, and several transfers in July of 2019 totaling 1.39 billion were made to the revenue consolidated fund. Now, only 1.139 billion as of July 2019 was deposited to the consolidated fund, when there was well, based on what I'm reading here, 2016 had 333.918 million. Then you had 514.873 million and 1.165 billion. What is causing the authority to not deposit these monies in a timely manner to the consolidated fund, say probably in December of the year, so that it can be, considered for the budget of the next year? And just assuming that.
Escrow is escrow. There's a reason why an amount goes into an escrow fund. It goes into there because it is held in trust until a matter is completed. So that we have to get that off. The next thing is that I agree with the general that these escrow amounts should be transferred on a timely basis. That was brought to my account. That was brought to my attention. I immediately told him to transfer everything. I said, because regardless of whether these files are still open or not, the escrow would keep the building and would be able to cover those files that are closed or those files that we may lose judgment on. Because it goes there because it might be subject to a court matter, or it might be subject to other things where the file is not closed.
But you said that you gave the instruction for them to transfer everything.
Yes.
But based on what I'm reading here.
Look, the transfer 1.39 billion. You are reading 1.165.
No, I'm reading 1.165 for 2018.
No, it is ending balances.
Yeah, but if you add...
No, you can't add them. It's ending balances is a cumulative effect.
Oh,
so that amount at 2016,
okay, so at 2016 it was 331.
Right.
And at 2017 it was 514. Right. And at 2018 it was 1.1.
Right. And the mere fact that we transferred 1.39 in July, it shows that for the year 2019, those amounts were also transferred all at the same.
Okay, I was interpreting it wrong here. Sorry.
Member Finance, you have the floor.
We were looking at paragraphs in 2017, 251, and 2018, 298 to 299. It says the registrar used to record foreign vehicles coming in and going out of Guyana lacked supervisory check. And from the 30,669 vehicles that entered the country, there was no evidence that 1,646 left the country. That was in 2017. And in 2018, 766 vehicles did not exit Guyana, based when compared to how many entered.
Yeah.
What is in place at the moment?
All that we do, we give the police we have a list, we give the police all the vehicles that have not left. And the police would now need to go behind them. Right. That is not a GRA function. To go behind the vehicles that are in the country. There have been some instances where we have found that some vehicles, they come to Guyana and they are false in the number plates and these things. As a matter of fact, one of my staff was dismissed because he went to Suriname and brought over one of the vehicles and make some changes in it. And one, right? So he was dismissed. So what I mean is that whether we like it or not, because of the duty, the high duty of and excise taxes on vehicles in Guyana, we would find people buying them in Suriname and coming over here and trying to do all sorts of stuff. They take the old number plates and put it on the new vehicles and all sorts. Those things would be
Crash vehicles as well, I believe.
yes, crash through that. Yeah, they do all of that. So we see a few. One of them right downstairs that we're utilizing right now. Yeah, right. We've given a few to the police and all that we would have found. But unless you get law enforcement to help.
Do the police usually give you any feedback?
Yes.
If they identify these people?
Well, I mean, as long as they identify them, I mean, but many times when they would have passed that month duration, most people would write an asking for an extension. You have lots of Suriname businessmen who are also here, and I mean, they would be using the Suriname vehicles. And you will find a lot did not go back in 2020 and 2021 because of COVID. And if you go to let them, and I would advise that some people go to let them, you will see in front of most business places Brazilian vehicles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Right, and you ask the police to go behind them. Nobody goes behind them, and most of those vehicles are in let them. Trust me. Right? Ask the chairman to hold the next PSA meeting letter.
Do you think Siraj owes tax?
That is confidential information that I cannot divulge.
That wasn't recognized. Financial.
No, sorry, I think that's about sums it up with my line of questions.
We had enough of GRA.
Yes. I think GRA came in June in fact answer the questions.
So, member CG, I want to thank you and your team for making an appearance to the Public Accounts Committee.
I think for clarity, please verify that Comrade Siraj does not have any question. I don't want him to accuse you of not allowing him to ask any question.
CG, I want to thank you and your team for making an appearance before the Public Accounts Committee. We were satisfied with all of the responses, and we trust that you continue the good work that you guys are doing there to upgrade the services of GRA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of myself and team. What I would like to also remind you that when we see a drop in taxes for 2022, that you should take into consideration the time that myself and my extra officers spent waiting on the PSC. And thanks again.
Yes, you know that would happen. With you at the wheel. Members will break for 10 minutes and then we'll facilitate telecommunication that has about 30 something paragraphs. Yes. All right, PS, welcome to PSE. Could you kindly introduce the staff to the members of the PSE?
Good evening, Chair and members of the PSC. To my right is Ms. Jolene Brown, Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Office of the Prime Minister. My left, Mr. Randyal Nankumar, who is the General Manager of the Audit Conference Center. And to his left, Ms. Jillian Pollard, Deputy General Manager of the National Data Management Authority. The extreme left, Mr. Francis Simmons, who is the other Deputy General Manager. He's Deputy General Manager Operations. Ms. Paul is the Deputy General Manager Administration. And to his right is Dr. Samantha Scotland, Head of Strategic Planning and Technical Standards. Behind me, Frank Gomes, Accountant for the Audit Conference Center. And to his right, Ms. Sheldon Luke Wilson, Technical Officer to the Permanent Secretary. And to her right, Ms. Joan Blackman, Expenditure Plan and Monitoring Advisor. Analyst.
Thank you, PS. Members, we have the Ministry of Public Telecommunication before us. We have 14 paragraphs for 2017 and 26 paragraphs for 2018. I put all of the paragraphs for 2017 and I put the remaining, all of the paragraphs for 2018 for our consideration. The floor is open to all members. For 2017, that is 417 to 430. And for 2018, 513 to 338. 26 and 14 paragraphs respectively.
Chair.
Member Maipoyal.
So paragraph 429 of 2017 and 537 of 2018. What is the status of the damaged laptops, and did the agency write to the Commissioner of Police requesting the police report on these damaged and stolen laptops?
Mr. Chair, the status of the laptops remain the same. The agency did not write the Commissioner of Police. The agency noted that on the 27th of December 2015, a very detailed forensic report was done on the one laptop for family as a special investigation into the financial operations and functions by Raman McRae. And the report is a public document available online. And the report highlights what could have gone wrong and provides clarity in this whole issue of the one laptop for family that keeps coming up. I was here the last time on it. It's going to say it coming up today. And it likely will come up for 2019 and 2020. I have flagged the sections of the report if the chair requires me to quote from them. If not, this report deals with all these questions. And I think I would like to, with respect, report this esteemed committee to the findings of this report.
Given the findings of the report, PS, would you be consider making any efforts to write the FS for this not to be a consistent repeat in the Auditor General's report for it to be written on? Because this was since 2015. And
Chair, I thank you for that question. The last last time I appeared before you on this matter, I did indicate that I had indicated to the Auditor General that asked him if he's willing to support a request to the FS for this matter to be written out.
So your intention is to write the FS?
I am prepared to do so, sir.
Okay. Member of Finance, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Paragraph 524, looking at 2018. 524. We see the breach of the stores regulation. Sorry, we see it citing a couple of breaches. However, my question to you is that firstly, do you have the full quota of staff when it comes to implementing effectively to the book the stores regulation?
Madam, we have since we have a storekeeper designated to look at the stores based on the Auditor General's report. But in terms of full complement of staff, I wish to indicate that the Ministry of Public Telecommunications was absorbed within the Office of the Prime Minister, and with a budget of more than 3 times what used to happen. And the staff complement is about the same, with several people in acting positions. I know we're waiting on the Public Source Commission to be reconstituted, but there are many people in acting positions, sometimes more than 2 times higher than 2 times of their tier. And so the answer is no, we don't have the full complement of staff, but we're trying our best to fulfill the mandate of the Ministry.
So do you see yourself being able to correct these sightings as made in the Auditor General's report here without having full complement of staff?
Madam Member, yeah, we have, as I said, assigned a full-time storekeeper on this matter, and we have improved in healing these breaches and in operating according to the requirements of the Financial Act.
Mr. Rajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 417419, that's 2017, 513, 517, 2018. Mr. Chairman, it stated 107 employees were transferred to the National Data Management Authority, but it's not stated under what conditions, because these paragraphs deal specifically with contracted employees. So merely stating that they were transferred does not give us any information relative to the status under which they were transferred. If they continue to be contracted employees at this new place, or whether they are now on a fixed establishment.
Mr. Chair, I seek your permission to ask the Deputy Manager Administration, Ms. Gillian, to respond.
Good evening. Let me respond to that question. The employees were transferred to the National Data Management Authority in 2016. 13 pensionable employees for NDMA were merged with 83 contracted employees from the e-government units. An additional 30 persons were hired in 2018. The total employed at the end of 2018 was 126. And as a further breakdown, that was comprised of 1 administration staff, 2 senior technical, other technical and craft skilled 6, clerical and other support 2, semi-skilled operatives and unskilled 2, contracted employees 113, bringing the total employed at the end of 2018 to 126.
So, Mr. Chairman, clarification. So, in relation to this 107, because what happened in 2016 is not up here for questioning or perusal. This 107 refers to 2017 and 2018. These 107 employees who were transferred to the MDMA, they were transferred on a contractual basis, or they are now on the fixed establishment?
There were 13 persons who were on the fixed establishment, and those were included in that number.
So of this 107, it's accurate to say 13 of this 107 are now on the fixed establishment, and the balance of them, they were on contract.
At that point, they were on the fixed establishment, and they continued to be on the fixed establishment. They were never contracted employees.
But you're saying 13 of them?
Yes, 13 of them.
And it states here 107 were transferred. What happened to the rest of them?
The others were contracted employees.
Mr. Chairman, 2018 at 525 and 526. I know it's reported here that in 2018 that $40.9 million were paid into the consolidated fund. So this amount will include the $16.4 million out of 27. Well, this is a 2018 observation, says it's $16.491 million was collected and not deposited. I note here that the ministry responding that say $40.9 million were deposited into the consolidated fund. So this would include additional amounts in 2019 and also in 2020.
The general manager of the Audit Conference Center, Mr. Malcolm.
Sir, you're correct. The $40.913 million include revenues generated 2017, 2018, and 2019.
Mr. Chairman, under the FMA Act, receipts for agents or budgetary agents are supposed to be paid into the consolidated fund, and any withdrawal will have to be subject to approval from the relevant authorities. I see here the Auditor General is flagging an instance or instances where payments totaling $26.15 million were made from this agency. And these are funds, I suppose, that would have had to be deposited into the consolidated fund. How would the accounting officer report on this matter?
Go ahead, sir. Sir, the sum that's reflected here, $26.15 million, were made from the center's bank account. This would have been as a result of the way the conference center operates. We provide a package to our client. The package would include the venue cost, cost for meals, cost for tents, tables, chairs from third-party services. So when the payment received by the conference center, we would have to then pay the catering service, pay additional costs. So the sum that you're seeing here, 26.1 million, that sum would have been a total from third-party services that payments were made for.
If I could add, many of the third-party services require an advance before they provide the service, and this is how the money is utilized. I think the way forward we have decided is to try to seek a subvention. The town conference center doesn't get a subvention. Try to seek a subvention to cater for this kind of difficulty.
Mr. Chairman, it's just following the rules because it is flagged here as a violation of the regulation that governs budget agencies. So the center would, I assume, budget for expenses throughout the years, and whatever receipts they would have had would come into their account and then go into the consolidated fund. It's not a case where the Auditor General is saying that these funds are missing. because the ministry or the head of the budget agency did respond by saying that action will be taken to correct the situation. So it's a case whereby something is being done against the regulations, and it ought not to happen. So if the center is for budgetary purpose based on previous year operation, know that they're going to use $20 million or $25 million for the year to carry out these transactions. They should budget for it. And I think that is what the head of the budget agency is stating, that this is what they need to correct. And I note here also that this situation is going to repeat itself in 2019. So it's going to be flagged again as an area of concern by the Auditor General. And I want to suggest that the way to get out of this is to budget for it. And it's better you over budget, and in that case, then you can always return to the consolidated fund rather than to continue to breach one section of the regulation that governs the operation of the center. So I don't know if the accounting officer can give us some comfort to see what measures will be put in place to avoid a reoccurrence of this breach.
Yes. Sir, the Auditor Conference Center receives funds for operational costs, not for events. And I alluded to earlier that the solution is to seek a subvention to cater for this type of expense, because there's no way we can turn away persons who come to use the Auditor Conference Center for all sorts of things. That's why the center exists in the first place, and not be able to cater for the third-party services. So that is the proposal.
But the Auditor Convention Center is usually rented, right?
Correct.
Sorry. Is there a standard fee, or is it dependent on the level of the activity?
There is a standard fee. However, in terms of larger function, clients would seek price change or waive. Or
clients seek the price change, or is that determined by the center itself?
It will be determined by the administration of the center.
What is the standard fee?
The standard fee, if I could give you a ballpark figure, yes. It costs approximately $1 million to rent the center for a day. That would include all of the conference rooms, the lawns, courtyards, everything. But a client desires to use a single room that has a separate cost.
Okay.
So sorry, I didn't hear the standard fee for the entire compound.
$1 million.
Oh. For a day.
And that's non-negotiable?
Do you charge more if you feel that the appliances and so will be at risk?
It includes a security deposit, but if, according to the nature of the activity, if a charitable event or something that's social, then a request is made or appeal is made to the permanent secretary
to waive the fees,
not a waiver, for some adjustment, okay. Some consideration.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just on 527, I'm just asking that
for 2017.
No, sir, 2018.
527.
Yes. 2018 is 527.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just enforcing that the PS seek to ensure that the conditions under which appropriation can be made is followed, which is agreement with the Minister of Finance, so that, like I said, that this will not be flagged again as an issue by the Auditor General.
Accepted and noticed, sir.
Members, the paragraphs are still open for your consideration. Members, do we have any additional questions? Member Siraj? Yes, I want to thank you and your team for making an appearance. I know we had a very long day and you had to leave, but we're happy that you were committed to come back with your full team. So we want to say thanks for making an appearance, and do have a blessed rest of the evening.